Maybe you like the person enough to vote for him. There's a couple endorsements came out in the presidential election this weekend that caught my eye. The Michigan Black Caucus has endorsed Joe Biden for president, and Congresswoman Haley Stevens is endorsing Mike Bloomberg. And then the Detroit Free Press decides to wait on their endorsement completely. Usually they would come out by now and pick who they're endorsing, but they decided they needed more time. So we wanted to talk about this amongst ourselves and with our political expert, Dave Dulio, Oakland University professor. Dave, how are you?
Good, Kevin. How are you?
Doing well. So which is the bigger endorsement, Congresswoman Stevens endorsing Bloomberg or the Michigan Black Caucus endorsing Biden?
I will say that it's Congresswoman Stevens' endorsement only because it's a little bit more unexpected, maybe. The fact that the Michigan Democratic Party Black Caucus endorsed Biden is really no surprise. It speaks to Biden's tremendous support within the African-American community. But for Congresswoman Stevens to come out so far in advance of the Michigan primary and throw her support behind Michael Bloomberg, I think is something to take note of.
Yeah, Joe Biden really needed a boost here after Iowa finishing in fourth. Is this the kind of thing that really helps him, and does he have to get a lot more endorsements in these key states?
It doesn't help him yet. He needs to make it to Michigan, frankly. We saw how dramatically the race changed coming off of Iowa. And a similar dynamic may happen tomorrow when New Hampshire votes. And then we've got Nevada and South Carolina. South Carolina is really the former vice president's firewall. And if he doesn't stop any bleeding right there, he might not make it past Super Tuesday, in which case it would be really tough for him to compete here in Michigan.
He's like on fumes now. Forget about he's not raising money, but just his performance in the last few weeks has been really stagnant. Though, like you say, he may not even make it to Michigan, but if South Carolina he doesn't pull in, does he have to win it or finish top two? What does he have to do to even be viable after that? Because that's his firewall, like you said.
That's a great question, and there's two answers to that question. The first one, from a political standpoint, is yes, he does. That is where he has pointed for the last year plus to say, I'm going to do really well in South Carolina. But at the same time, what really matters in this Democratic primary race is delegates to the national convention. And on Super Tuesday, that's really where a huge portion of delegates are going to be allocated. Not so many in these first four contests, including South Carolina. David, but from a political standpoint, from a momentum standpoint, Biden has got to do well in South Carolina.
David, do you know of any cases where an endorsement actually may hurt a candidate? Because I see Rashida Tlaib is a strong supporter of Bernie Sanders. I have just heard that some of the Sanders supporters are, we don't need her coming out in favor of Bernie Sanders. Do you see that very often? Is that viable?
Well, I think the answer is different in a primary election compared to a general. I think that the Tlaib endorsement of Sanders is a fine one in the primary. From the general, it might be more problematic.
Yeah.
Does Congresswoman Stevens gain any power by being early on the Mike Bloomberg train if he ends up winning? Do they remember that and come back and help out the people who endorsed them early on?
Oh, I think most definitely. It's something that shows trust between the endorser and the endorsee, that they believe in this candidacy. And they got in on the ground floor, right? Mike Bloomberg isn't even competing in these first four primaries. He's at a severe disadvantage. So for Congresswoman Stevens to come in and throw her weight behind that campaign, I think is important and would be remembered. Let's not forget, though, that the Stevens campaign in 2018 and Mike Bloomberg's super PAC. They didn't have a relationship. They didn't have a connection. But Bloomberg spent on behalf of Stevens 2 years ago.
What do you think of the Detroit Free Press? Typically they would have come out with an endorsement, and they printed in the paper this weekend that they've decided to wait on an endorsement. I mean, are they afraid they're going to pick someone who's not going to be in the race, or what do you think's going on there?
Well, I think that's entirely possible. The field could look so different on March 4th, the day after Super Tuesday, than it does right now. And I think that the Free Press, maybe wisely, is waiting to see how things shake out. This is an incredibly muddled primary race right now, where we really don't know who's going to emerge even in a couple of weeks. Once we get past, as we talked about with South Carolina, we see where Biden is. We see how Bloomberg does on Super Tuesday, which is March 3rd. And then I think we'll have a much better sense of the direction this primary race is headed. When
are they coming? When do you think the candidates will start campaigning here in Michigan? At March 4th, or you think they'll come in before that?
Well, Bloomberg already is, right? He's made a stop here. He is. You can hardly turn the TV on without seeing.
Yeah, commercial-wise, yeah.
Without his ads.
Right. I mean,
he's been here twice. Yeah, he was at twice already.
Yeah. Well, he had nothing else to do because he's sitting out the first ad. I think got plenty of time.
I think him and Trump are the only people who've been here. Maybe someone else, but I think that's all they've been.
I haven't seen the rest of them.
So Bloomberg's active, and the rest of them, they got to go. They got to spend time in each of these upcoming states. And so I think you're right. I think March 4th is when the Democratic field descends on Michigan.
David, after March 4th, if nobody has really caught fire, could you see Hillary Clinton coming back into the mix?
Oh, boy.
She can.
She can try.
Uh-huh.
I think Mike Bloomberg is the one who's tried to get in this race late, and he's playing from behind right now, and it's going to be really tough for him to get the nomination. Whether he can get enough delegates in the contests that are coming up here, it really remains to be seen. It would be even more difficult for somebody like Hillary Clinton to mount a campaign at this point. But one of the real possibilities in this is that no candidate in the current field goes to the Democratic National Convention in the summer in Milwaukee with enough delegates to claim the nomination. And if it's a contested convention or a brokered convention, then you're really looking at all options on the table.
Well, she can't even count on her own vote, let alone.
How many people do you think drop out after New Hampshire, if any, or do people really try and hang on until Super Tuesday?
Well, I think a couple at least. There are some who are going to run out of money and just can't keep going. They won't be able to pay their staff. They won't be able to do any advertising. But I think you look at at least a couple that drop out.
But not Bloomberg. He's got enough money to last forever.
Well, if he spends the couple billion that it's rumored he might, he's going to blanket the airwaves and put a lot of mail in your mailbox.
I will say this: his commercial, the one he did about Trump, and the recent one, that's the most effective Democratic commercial I've seen so far. I don't know if you saw this new one.
He's not afraid.
No, not at all.
He's not. His ads are really good. I mean, they're memorable. They introduced him to the public here in Michigan, who probably don't know a whole lot about him. I think it'll be different once he starts to really engage on issues and starts to contrast himself with Trump. And for that matter, when Trump tries to contrast himself with whoever emerges from the Democratic primary.
All right, Dave Doolio, thanks for joining us on the Mitch Albom Show. We appreciate it.
Anytime, fellas. Have a good afternoon.
All right, let's